The title is very interesting, Standing Guard, a year in opposition. How would you describe your days in opposition, after a long stint in the finance ministry?
I think the opposition is as important as the ruling party.
Right.
And we lost an election, but we have not lost the support of a large proportion of the people.
Right.
Those who voted for the government are only 31%. There is another voice, another point of view that represents 69%.
Right.
But I believe the opposition's business is to be vigilant, to be a vigilant opposition, not a loyal opposition,
Right.
and articulate the other point of view
Right.
with reason, with logic. I think the business of the opposition is to stand guard.
Right.
And that's precisely why I called my book Standing Guard.
Yes. Sir, one of the things you have mentioned, you have observed in the book is that the Modi government has failed to, read the economic trends. That's what you have said in your note. Ever since this government has come to power, they have always blamed the UPA for the economic mess it has supposedly created. How do you, respond to this?
How long can you keep blaming the previous government? If every government begins to blame the previous government, there will be no end to this.
Right.
We left an economy that, according to their own CSO, their own numbers, was growing at 6.6%. The decadal growth between 2004 and 2014, the 10-year period, saw the highest growth in India's history.
Right.
So how can you keep blaming the previous government?
Yes.
Reform is an unfinished process. Every government has to continue where the previous government left the matter.
Right. Yeah. Sir, you have also, observed that the NDA government has been more or less repackaging the schemes, whether it is the DBT, the Jan Dhan, or anything that goes to the rural land. Is this repackaging, is there something that, in your view, that they have come with original character that can actually take for instance, banking services to the masses?
I have no objection if they repackage our schemes. Imitation is the best form of flattery.
Right.
But to claim that nothing was done by the previous government is completely wrong. Take Jan Dhan, for example.
Right.
What is Jan Dhan except the same program that we launched under financial inclusion?
Yes.
We had included,
Yeah.
by the time we demitted office, and I mentioned this in my book, we had included as many as 24.3 crore accounts. They have now come and added another 14 or 15 crore accounts.
Right.
But while I credit them with adding 14 crore accounts, they simply don't want to acknowledge that 24.3 crore accounts were already there when they came to government. Similarly, they are pushing Aadhaar and direct benefit transfer. I'm very happy because it's our scheme. They have suddenly rediscovered the virtues of Maganrega after calling it a monument to Congress's failure. So I'm very happy that they are continuing our schemes, even if they are repackaging it.
Yes. One other issue you have time and again emphasized in your weekly observations is the mess that is in the banking sector and the impacts across the verticals in the economy. Again, this is something the NDA government has blamed the UPA for the current mess, the mismanagement of PSU banks or the directed lending or even the interested party lending, so on. So how do you look at this entire NPA issue now?
NPAs have always been with banks. As long as there is an economy, there is a banking system, there will be an NPA. In 2002, 2003, Shekhar Gupta in Indian Express commenced a series of articles called The Great Indian Bank Robbery. He was talking about NPAs and bad loan accounts in 2002-03. Now, who was the Prime Minister at that time? Mr. Vajpayee. Now, nobody says Mr. Vajpayee asked the banks to give these loans. In an economic slowdown, there will be NPAs. The point I've been making is you must distinguish between willful defaulters and victims of economic downturn. If you take action against willful defaulters, that's perfectly right. But against victims of an economic downturn, banks and the government must understand that many accounts have become NPA only because of the economic downturn.
That can't be blamed to the UPA. It's not prudent.
Government does not lend money. It's the banks which lend money. Banks have independent chairmen. They have boards of directors. They have a RBI who's a regulator. They have statutory auditors appointed by the RBI. How do you blame the government for that?
Mr. Chidambaram, in the context of now that you mentioned the willful issue of willful defaulters, one particular issue, if you permit me, this been discussed a lot is the Vijay Mallya case, where 9,000 crore worth of loans which been NPA for over 4 years, and the entire banking industry, the regulators are all after this, and Mr. Mallya himself has been very defiant in his approach to banks. How do you look at this issue, and what would you have done had you been the finance minister at this stage?
I don't know the facts of Mr. Malya's case. All I know is that he had defaults even with the service tax department and the income tax department. The two departments did take action against him. In fact, the first two departments that took action against him were the Department of Income Tax and the Department of Service Tax. If banks have lent, I understand some 20 banks have lent to him. It's for the banks to take appropriate action. Now, I cannot say whether in some cases he's a willful defaulter, in some cases he has been a victim of economic downturn. Those are not matters on which I can judge without full information.
Just to continue with this, does this also point out the ineffectiveness of the willful defaulter, something which Mr. Raghuram Rajan has often highlighted as a powerful weapon of banks?
You see, banks have a way of classifying NPAs. Over a period of time, the classification has become stricter and tighter. Earlier, I think it was 90 days. Now I think 180 days. Now I think if 1 quarter the loan is not being serviced, it becomes an NPA. Now, whether money was diverted, whether the company which borrowed the money was denied the money, these are not matters which anyone sitting here can say. It's only a forensic audit or a deeper investigation can tell you whether there has been willful default. If the banks come to that conclusion, they are free to take action.
Right. Let me just ask one more question in this context. The judiciary has been coming into the loan recovery process of banks in many cases, which has been delaying the process, and in turn, the underlying asset value deteriorates so much. So, is it time for us to relook at the entire, the judiciary mechanism to deal with such cases?
See, I don't think there are judicial standards by which the judiciary can sort out the industry-wide problem. See, if steel accounts have become NPA, that's because there is a global downturn. How does the judiciary sort it out? There is a government, there is a regulator, the RBI, and there are well laid down guidelines about how to deal with the NPA. I think the judiciary should leave it to the government and the RBI to sort out the NPA problem rather than trying to find a judicial solution. I don't think there is a judicial solution to a NPA problem.
So what is the way out of the current NPA mess?
That's for the government and the RBI to decide. I cannot suggest a way out.
Right. Mr. Chidambaram, let me ask your views on the budget specifically. I understand you have already appreciated Mr. Jaitley's, following the fiscal roadmap. But on the other hand, you have also observed that the benefit of lower crude oil prices, which should have ideally benefited the economy for productive spending purposes, has not been utilized much.
No, they missed an opportunity. They had a bonanza, according to my calculation, of about 1,40,000 crore. Now, if they had collected their direct tax revenues,
Right.
if they had collected their non-tax revenues, disinvestment, and if they had stuck to the projected nominal GDP growth, this 1,40,000 would have been available, or at least about 1,00,000 crore rupees would have been available for additional investment, public investment. But since they failed on these three fronts, the bonanza was used to fill the gaps. And therefore, I think they missed an opportunity. And that's what I pointed out in the last column.
Right. One related question, sir. There is a huge debate going on whether we are indeed growing at the 7.6%, which has been reflected as based on the rebased GDP numbers, or is the growth still stuck somewhere at the ground? How do you?
I don't question the integrity of the CSO's numbers.
Yeah.
Because CSO is a government organization and there's no reason for me to question it. All I can tell you is the feeling on the ground, what feedback I get from industry, from business, from trade.
Right.
Nobody believes that we are growing at 7.5%.
Yes.
Exports are down for 14 months. IIP is negative for 3 straight months.
Right.
Nominal GDP growth is no more than 8.6%.
Right.
Credit growth is only about 8.4 or 8.5% or maybe 9%.
Yes.
With these indicators all looking so dismal, it's very difficult to accept the government's statement that we are growing at 7.5%.
Yes.
But if we are growing at 7.5%, I'm happy. But why are these indicators so negative? I don't know.
Right. Coming back to the budget, sir, the NTA government has projected this budget as a big rural push. Significant spending on the irrigation, on the rural spending, on the farm infrastructure. Do you believe so?
Well, I have analyzed the numbers. I don't think they are putting more money into rural infrastructure. I pointed it out that 15,000 crore, which was tucked away in the Department of Financial Services, has been added to the Department of Agriculture.
Right.
If you net that out, they're only providing about 20,000 crore, which is restoring the allocation of 2014-15. In 2015-16, they cut the allocation to the Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare by almost 5,000 crore. Now they're restoring the 5,000 crore. I don't believe that they have put additional money into the Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare.
Sir, one thing I would like to hear from you is the entire pace of reform process. This government came to power promising a pro-business, pro-economy, pro-growth-oriented reform push. When you look back after, say, 20 months of this government's term, how do you analyze?
So I'm surprised too. They are pro-business. Their party is considered pro-trader. Big business supported them in the election campaign. They gave them big money.
Right.
They spent a huge amount of money in the election.
Right.
But today business is completely disappointed. And in fact, privately, they'll tell you they are sulking. They simply don't know what went wrong. I think they've lost the confidence of Indian industry, which is why Indian business and Indian industry is not investing in India.
Right.
Private investment is sputtering. In fact, it has completely stalled. And if private investment is not taking place, I must say that they have lost the confidence of Indian business.
Right. Sir, one thing, but at the same time, there is an argument that at the opposition, as you have been highlighting in your columns, that, this the reform process, especially on the taxation front, etc., GST, is very critical at this stage when India is considered to have much better chance than the other EM peers. Has Congress failed to meet that duty?
No, I don't think so. I gave a number. We have passed almost 45 bills until the last session in the Lok Sabha and some 50 bills in the Rajya Sabha. Which bill have we stalled? The only bill that is stalled is the GST bill.
Right.
We have pointed out 3 major flaws in the bill. The government promised to come back with its response.
Yeah.
As I speak, my information is the government has not come back with its response. So if the GST bill is stalled, it's only because the government has not yet responded to the 3 flaws that we have pointed out.
All right. Sir, another issue is the black money, the black money issue, which again the government has promised to bring back. That was one of the poor promises. How far they have succeeded?
They have not. They have failed. In fact, their leader said it's a Chunavi Jumla. They promised to put 15 lakhs in each account. and Mr. Sashi Tharoor has calculated, they have put something like 30 rupees in each account.
Right.